Today we're talking to Rod Hogrefe. Rod is an entrepreneur and an intrapreneur and an all-round business builder. He's acquired, built and sold several businesses, but also has spent some time as a senior executive at global organizations, including being the GM and director at Lexmark and an executive general manager at Fuji Xerox. So, Rod, thank you very much for sharing your time with us. We're really excited to have you on.
It's my pleasure, Paul. I'm pleased to be here.
Great. So, you've been through the journey of entrepreneurship successfully, I might add, a few times. Does it get any easier the more you do it?
Not, I would say not. I think,
why do you say that?
Each journey has its own, profile, if you like, and has its own unique set of circumstances and its own unique challenges that get thrown at you. And I think it probably gets easier in one sense because you've learned lots of lessons along the way from the last one. But on the other hand, if you rely on those lessons, I suspect you'll come unstuck because each journey is different and you need to assess them on their merits as they come to you.
Absolutely. So a key audience for us is tech startups and small businesses. And I think in any growing company, hiring people is a critical exercise. You know, each new person can make a very significant difference to the business. And certainly hiring the wrong person can be quite costly. What non-job specific things do you look for when you're hiring top talent?
Yeah, great question. And I agree with you. I think that just before I answer that, the success of the business or venture that you're into comes down a lot to the players that you choose and elect to bring with you on that journey. And be it whether you're an entrepreneur in a startup or whether you're, as an entrepreneur in a large organisation, the team will make a massive difference to you. And I've been involved in ventures where the wrong team has been assembled. If at best it'll slow the journey down for you, and at worst it'll derail it because those folks aren't aligned with where you're heading.
Right.
So vitally important subject, and I'm glad you're starting with it because to me it is a foundational topic.
Yes.
And so the things that I guess I look for are probably more what I'd call DNA traits rather than learned skills. So if we take a separation there of what is nature and what is nurture, right?
Okay.
So there's two splits there. And so I look for the DNA things first. Does the person demonstrate or has experience or demonstrated experience and success around things that I believe you can't learn? And so things like having a positive attitude towards adversity is very difficult to learn. Right? It's DNA.
Right.
Versus, can I teach you to write code in HTML?
Yes.
Yeah, I can teach that. Right? And so I look for traits now that I think are required for success, that are DNA. And if they don't pass the DNA test, they get ruled out. They could be the best coder, the best marketeer, but if they don't pass the DNA test, they're out.
Right.
So it's the traits that I try and test for, resilience as a starting point, energy and optimism, because particularly life in a startup it's a roller coaster ride, as they all say. Yes. And if you don't have the stomach or the fortitude for that, you shouldn't really be in that game. And a lot of people get romanced into the startup world because it's exciting, it's dynamic, it's fun, right? Because that's how it's portrayed. But it's great now that people are actually saying it's not always a rosy cup of tea. It's a challenging place to be. Right? And if they don't have that fortitude, if they're just there for the fun ride, then they're going to be a burden on the business, not a benefit.
I think romance is a great word, and at the other end of the spectrum, from what people expect, often lies some degree of failure. So
yes.
How can leaders build a culture that overcomes a fear of failure and encourages experimentation?
Yeah, look, that also I think is a great question. In that, often you'll find, I'll say, tyrannic leaders who are very dominant in the way they want things done will engender this culture of you will do it my way or it's the highway,
Yes.
which really kills off any innovation whatsoever because people are too scared. Right? And so there's a lady, Christine Comfort, who has just written a book, Smart Tribes. I don't know if you've heard of it, but she brings us down to 3 basic points that you need in order to get this right. She talks about safety, belonging, and what matters.
Okay.
Right? So that you matter. And if you can create an environment where those 3 things exist, you will create an environment where people are comfortable to take risks, to challenge norms, to experiment, to try. Right? There was a technique I've used in some previous businesses where we'd actually issue folks 2 cards, right? And one was the trust me card, right? And the other one was the get out of jail free card.
Okay, I like it.
And so it's just a bit of fun. It's nothing serious. Like nobody's career hung on this, right? But it was a way to shift a culture from being ingrained in fear to encouraging experimentation. And it wasn't the only thing we did. But you issue people with these 2 cards and you say, look, when you've got a good idea and you want to go for it and you're not feeling like the support's there, but you really believe in it, play the trust me card.
Right.
And we'll cut you some slack. Go for it, right? If it all goes to custard, you play the get out of jail free card. And away you go, okay? But you only get a set of cards, right? So
only one set of cards.
Use them carefully.
Right, okay.
But the idea is if you play it, you get your cards back, right? And so, that way it's just not a free-for-all because if you take that to the other end of the spectrum, people say, I can do whatever I want.
Yes.
Right? So there needs to be balance.
Yes, there's got to be a level of accountability.
Yeah, exactly. And so by, whether you give 1 set of cards or 3 set of cards, it doesn't matter. The idea is it's a little bit of gamification around shifting people's mindset from, oh my God, I don't want to mess up, through to, no, let's have a go. I really believe this could work.
I think it's a brilliant idea. And on that note, in startups and small businesses in particular, there's often a lot of new CEOs, people that are new to management, and in larger businesses as well. But, particularly for new leaders, it's often difficult to work out how they should run their management meetings. They're often messy and hard to get right. There may be too many people or the agenda isn't clear. How do you structure and run your management meetings?
Yeah, if I could just start at one point back for the new leaders.
Yes.
Right? If I may, if I can just...
By all means.
Yeah. So the first thing I do is I look at the talent pool. Right? So whenever I start a new venture, if I inherit an existing operation or I'm starting in a new corporate, I'm looking at the talent pool first. Right? So who's in my executive leadership team, and then who's in the team underneath that, and I want to get an idea of where the level of talent lies, right? And who are the potential exits and who are the retainers. Right. You can't figure that out in the first week, of course, but that's top of mind for me. If I don't have the right people on the bus, I'm in trouble.
Right.
No matter how good the talent is. The second thing I'm doing is I'm assessing the culture and the values in the business. So I want to understand, out of the people that I've got, what's the cultural environment that has been created in this tribe of people.
Right.
Is it a good, positive culture, or is it a negative, oppressive culture? Right. Because even if I've got really good people, but the culture is wrong, I'm going to struggle. All right. And then the third thing I'm looking for is what's the underlying business strategy and the business model and the key focus at the moment. Where is that sitting? Right. And so they're the 3 sort of main pillars that I think about in business that I want to really get a handle on in that first 90 days.
Okay, so before you even think about how you're going to run management meetings or something kind of tactical or granular like that, sort of, get the culture right first, get the people right, and, understand where the business is at and where it needs to go.
You got it.
Okay.
Because without all of that, then management meetings are a bit sort of pointless, really.
Right, of course. Well, I guess if you've got the wrong people on board, it's going to be a fight from day one.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So granted that you've got those things in place, you're running your business, things like feel pretty positive, but there's day-to-day and week-on-week things that have to be done, and kind of management meetings are one of those things because you want to make sure you've got a finger on the pulse of what's going on as a leader.
True. Yep.
How do you do it? I mean, I've been in countless management meetings that just feel like a waste of time, because maybe there's too many people or, no one's keeping track of the actions or I think there's many ways these sorts of meetings can go in the wrong direction.
Yes.
How do you avoid that?
Yeah. Well, I guess I start anchoring my management meetings behind a business plan. Mm-hmm. Right. And so if I just take it back one step and just bear with me, Paul, but I think a bit structured in this sense. And so having got the three pillars down, I'm now thinking about how I'm going to take the business forward. Because understanding those three things, I now know what I need to do in order to move it to where it needs to be. And so I'm looking at a business plan. And when I say business plan, I mean it's on one page. Okay.
Yep.
And those things start with purpose, and then they work their way through sort of values, vision, mission, goals, actions.
Okay.
And that anchors the business, and by the way, now the management team.
Okay.
Because we've all agreed this is what we're doing. This is what we're shooting for. Mm-hmm. This is what we need to do this year to achieve these results. Okay. And it's all on a page, so it's not buried in 4,000 words. It's on a page. Okay. Now that becomes the driving set of tablets for us, if you like, to drive our management meetings. So the management meetings, I use a rhythm, if you like, that I've adopted from Vern Harnish, who's an author of The Rockefeller Habits.
Right.
I recommend it highly for folks. It's on my sort of top 10 management books of all time.
Okay, I'll add a link.
Sorry?
I'll add a link below the video. On the
terrific.
post. Yeah.
Highly recommended. And so that rhythm sort of works on a daily huddle, stand up 10 minutes, talking about what we're doing today. Mm-hmm. It's not a did I do it session, it's just a communication session. Then into the weekly, which says how are we traveling, what are the obstacles we've got.
Yeah.
Then into the monthly one, which is really take a step back and, from 10,000 foot, take a look at how we're going. What are the key obstacles we're fronting? And then, I would typically do a one-day session on our management meetings. Mm-hmm. And the first 3 to 4 hours, depending on how big the business is, or the breadth of the business, we would do each of the management team would present for no more than 40 minutes on their part of the business. So they would look at their goals, their objectives, what are the obstacles, and.
So how frequently would you do that sort of session?
Once a month.
Once a month. Okay.
Once a month. So we're tracking their performance. Mm-hmm. And then we're, as a collective group, not a hierarchy, we're a collective group, we're actually giving that person some, as a sounding board, almost like a board, right? We're guiding them, we're not actually telling them, we're not passing judgment on them, right? They're talking about their part of the business. That helps the other guys lock in with their part of the business as well, so we're all aligned back to this single thing. Right?
Yes.
So we do that first. That's a little bit retrospective. Mm-hmm. But then at the conclusion of that, we would take a poll, if you like, on, all right, so now that we know where the state of the play is for the last month, we obviously know where we're trying to go. Where's the gap? What's the piece of the business that we need to work on mm-hmm. for the next 2 to 3 hours as a workshop, not as a meeting?
Right.
So now it's a workshop where we're saying, okay, this particular part of the business we're really struggling with, let's deep dive. Right, and we start to brainstorm, we'll come up with different ideas, we'll toss some things around again. We're operating as a management collective, not as a hierarchy.
Okay.
So out of that will come a set of actions, right, now that will help drive for the next 30 days, mm-hmm. right, our focused activity, and then we do it again.
Okay, so I think that's a great insight. So if I'm hearing correctly, it seems like there's a lot of education done before we even get to the meeting. Because if we want to have an effective meeting, we need to make sure that the right people are already on the same page. We're all moving in the same direction, so that once we're in some kind of meeting or workshop, we can focus on the right things for that period of time without revisiting probably a whole bunch of big things like the business plan that you mentioned. And so then how do you actually track those actions? Do you do it, because you've said that those meetings take place, say, once a month.
Yep.
How do you track them in between those meetings? Or is it just a matter of kind of leaving each individual to do it themselves for the month and then reporting back on how they've gone in the next meeting?
For a senior management team, I do the latter. They're big people. They know what to do.
Yes.
And if you're brave enough to turn up to a meeting and say, I have no progress to report,
yeah, good luck.
Good luck to you.
Fair enough.
You might get away with that once.
Yes.
Probably not twice.
You would have to use your get out of jail free card without having used the trust me card.
You got it.
And that's a problem.
That's a problem for them, yeah. And so, it depends on the size of the team, Paul. If you're a first line manager and you're running an operational team, I would track it a lot more closely.
Right.
Right, and I would link it back to the weekly meetings. They're sort of 30-minute once a week, Monday mornings, whatever you do it. How we're traveling, right? And you just link it to that. And so you're monitoring the progress. You won't allow it to wait a month and then come and go, oh, nothing's happened. Right.
So if there's a risk, if you think there's a risk based on the seniority of person or a lack of experience, you would look at it more closely or more granularly than once a month.
Correct. Right.
That makes sense.
And then in a senior leadership perspective, you're really saying these guys know what to do.
Yeah.
And the culture we create in those management meetings is one of, as I said, there's no hierarchy. So all the stripes come off the jacket, right? And we are, a board of folks that have skills and experience that we're coming to share. Okay. So it's okay to speak your mind, right? Yeah. Doors closed. We stay professional, but we are very, very candid. So it's a tough environment. Some people find it difficult, but it's that candidness that lets us cut through the rubbish and get to the point, right, of the hard questions that need to be asked, the challenging areas. And it's very confronting at first, right? But once people go through it and they realise that, yes, they're falling short and you know what, I didn't get fired.
Yep.
A level of confidence starts to come. So there's a journey of 3 to 6 months that you've got to go through to build this trust. But then it starts to operate on another level, right? And that's where the enjoyment comes and that's where the success comes, because people are now open to saying, you know what, I've never even explored that. I don't know why. It's like, don't worry about why. What can we do now, right? And so, it actually builds enthusiasm and energy in those folks.
Rod, we've talked a little bit about leadership. I just want to delve a bit more into your personal productivity and what sorts of techniques you use. Now, do you have any particular technique? There are obviously some well-known ones like David Allen's Getting Things Done, and there's the Pomodoro technique. One of the things that I've seen is quite consistent across the research conducted is that there's no one size fits all. There's no one answer for everyone. So, is there a particular productivity or recognized productivity methodology that you use?
No, I'm a hybrid sort of fella.
Okay.
So I like to pick the pearls out of different pieces of methodologies out there. And I can't say that I follow one particularly, Paul.
Right. Okay.
But I'm a morning person, and so I find my best time is early in the morning, and I generally start the day by taking a quick sweep of the email to figure out, is there anything that I need to climb all over or not? And then I'm really looking back, and I'll go back to the chosen tool that I'll use, and I'll actually start and review very quickly. Particularly once a week, I'll do a more in-depth review. Daily, not so much. But daily, I'm really looking at, okay, where's my day at today? What are the key things that I want to get done today? And I will pick and commit to myself that there'll be 3 to 5 things that I want to get done in priority order. And if I do number 5 and don't get number 1 done, I give myself uppercuts on the way home.
Yes.
Right? Because I've done the wrong thing. And so even if I only get number 1 done but miss the other 4, I'm a happy boy. Right? And so the priority is where I spend most of the time each morning. I'll look at those 5 things that I need to get done, and then I'll decide what can I not do today, and I sort of work it back in a reverse order, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Now, sometimes your boss, you'll have planned all that out, and the boss rings and says, you know what, I need X, Y, and Z by this because the board's asked me for, and you have to rearrange, and that's fine, right? And depending on the seriousness of that, you might want to renegotiate a time schedule with him or something, okay? Mm-hmm. But regardless, you figure out what your top priority is, and you need to have a level of discipline that says, I will work that way.
Right.
Now, you mentioned David Allen there, who I know has one of the methodologies is if you can get it done in 2 minutes or 30 seconds, get it done. I actually subscribe to that a little bit. I think that sometimes that noise can just eat away at you, yes. Sort of niggles away. And if you can dedicate, 10 or 15 minutes to clear the decks so that you can really focus on number one, then I think that's a really good use of time, and I'll often do that. I think some people fall into the trap of getting caught into that, and then of course there's another set of 5 bits of noise that you think, I'll just clear that, yes. And another set of, and they'll get into the next minute's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They're not in their peak productivity time, and now they're faced with having to get number one done in the last 3 hours of the day when their energy's low.
Okay, so you don't necessarily use a known, like subscribe wholly to a known methodology, but you do have your own methodology, and
yes.
And applying discipline to that is sort of a critical way or a critical part of you staying productive. And that
yes.
involves, it sounds like you make lists. You're a list maker, and you kind of review them generally on a weekly basis, but you kind of make sure you're prioritizing things on a daily basis.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And that weekly review for me is actually quite critical to the daily success, if you like, because I'm going back through and I'm looking at, okay, these are the commitments I've made to the board. These are the commitments I've made to the executive team. These are the commitments I've made to my management team. Am I on track? Are there things that I actually can't do? Because if I can't get them done, I want to call it out early.
Right.
I don't want to turn up and say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get it done. Mm-hmm. I want to actually flag that ahead of time because I want to be proactive about it.
So part of your being productive is not only about what can you get done, but also how you're communicating with the people around you to make sure that expectations are in the right place.
You got it, yeah. And keep everybody aligned with where we're at. Yeah. And because I think ultimately, particularly in larger corporates, that's critical to success. Mm-hmm. Nobody likes surprises.
Now, you've had a number of different roles, including, as I mentioned up front, working in kind of the entrepreneurial space, but also working for large organizations. So this question may have a few answers for you, but, what does your typical day look like?
Typical day for me, look, I'll start and, as I say, I'll open the day with a quick look at the email and figure out if there's any issue or issues I need to climb over. The second thing I'll do is look at, what do I want to get done today, and then I'll start and I'll work through my top 5. Right? A typical day in a corporate for me is generally I try and get a mix. A typical day is a very tough question because I'm just thinking back. I'm not sure that there is, in my world at least, not such a thing as a typical day.
Right.
I would segment things into. I'm working on initiatives that I have responsibility to lead, yes. or to deliver. I'm working with my team on initiatives that they're working on and they're seeking advice. Right? I'm working on the development of my people, so it might be conducting one-on-ones with them. I do a regular one-on-one with my team once a month. And that's their time. That's not for me to interrogate them. That's for them to utilize me however they see fit. They might want to talk about things, or we want to cover things if there's performance improvement areas that we want to discuss or particular development things. That's what the one-on-ones are for. I'll spend time with the up-and-comings. And so folks that are, I think, potential A-grade players, growing up. So I'll actually spend some time with each of those. And they might be 2 or 3 levels, in terms of their seniority, but we want to nurture them, right? Because we see a good seed there, right? And the other things that I'll spend time doing is what I call work experience. So I'll pick various parts of the operations and I'll go and work with them for a day, like genuinely work. And that means if it means putting on safety boots and a high-vis vest, if it means manning a call center phone, but not watching, I'm not talking about sitting next to somebody. I'm talking about actually doing the work.
Diving in.
Right, and because there's no better place to learn what's really going on in your business than A, being a customer of it, or B, getting in the bowels and working it.
Completely agree.
And I find that just builds awesome respect with the team, and it gives you a level of empathy that you just wouldn't get from sitting in your office.
Do you have a policy around how many meetings you can have in a day, or whether meetings should take place in the morning or the afternoon?
Yes, I do. I generally avoid meetings where I'm a CC. I sort of think about meetings as I'm in,
Yeah.
I've been CC'd or I've BC'd,
Right.
right? And so, meetings are a notorious waste of time.
Yes.
And if they're not carefully driven with agendas and linked back to the business plan, I'm very, very reluctant.
Right.
Because in your own business, you can be very prescriptive about those things.
Yes.
In corporate, sometimes you need to be politically correct and maneuver that over time to get the leadership above you to understand that why are we holding this meeting if it's not actually driving the business plan forward. Right.
One of the things that I suffer from, and I think a lot of people do, is information overload. It seems like everywhere you turn these days, there's more information, whether it's email, whether you like to keep up with reading the latest news or articles, whether you just haven't got a chance to read the notes from your last meeting, even things like text messages and chat messages popping up everywhere. And it's easy to see how these sorts of things can slow us down and give us a sense of being overwhelmed. How have you dealt with information overflow? How do you deal with it?
Yeah. So I guess I limit the amount of channels that can get into me.
Yes.
And so I won't have any form of social media channel open during the day because it's just way too distracting.
Right.
And even email, there is no sound or visual representation that I have received in email because it's distracting.
Right.
And so I will take periodic moments through the day where I will check those things.
So you'll literally have your email closed if you're doing other things.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to see it because it'll just distract me.
And do you schedule time in your calendar to look at emails, or you just find a space naturally in the day and you might check it for a limited period of time?
Yes, the latter. Yeah, I don't schedule it. I don't really use the calendar to schedule my time other than meetings. But what I will do is I'll actually ensure that there are blocked times in the calendar. So I won't schedule up. I need to work between 9 and 10:30 on this project tomorrow.
Right.
I'll just schedule that time that's proactive. That's my prime proactive time. I'll use that for whatever my number one is. Right. And so then for me, I would leave the afternoon more for meetings. Particularly, non-interactive or non-essentials, I'll always shift to the afternoon because that's where my lowest productivity point is.
Yes.
Now that seems silly because if you're going into a meeting, you should be highly productive. But if that meeting is not on that A list, then I'm going to schedule it for the afternoon. If I have to go, then it's going in the afternoon.
Yeah, I've read that there's some good science around people being most productive in the morning, but also there's some thinking around people need to be sensitive to their natural energy cycles. So there are various points in the day when people are more productive naturally and other points when they might be lower. And you want to obviously maximize on those times when you have a spike in energy so that you can focus better.
Yes.
One thing I want to ask is, how do you prioritize what you spend your time on?
I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey, and so I subscribe to his urgently reporting methodology, and so I'll use the quadrant. And sometimes when things get really overbearing, I'll actually I'll get a piece of paper, draw the 4 quadrants and start just dumping out of my head everything that's going on. And I'll actually start then categorizing it into the quadrants. And that actually helps me, it's a little bit of therapy, but it helps me figure out it's actually okay to say no to these things here.
And I think that's a huge thing for people. So, 2 things you've mentioned there is like, it's a form of therapy because I think people need that sense of relief. It's sort of a stress release and also helps them deal with that feeling of being overwhelmed. But it sounds like it's a good technique. How long would you spend drawing out the graph and figuring this out? Is it something that takes you a long time, or is it a quick exercise?
No. It's look, my end to end might be 15 minutes to half an hour.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't take long to dump everything out of your head. I mean, I don't write it down in long form. It's, it's bullet points. It's just a matter of get it out.
Right.
And then, whip the quadrant up and start, writing things in. And you can do it soft if you want, or hard, whichever works for you at the time. But the idea isn't to bellyache over it or to make it finessed or beautiful. It's just get it out and let me get to the core things, right? And so it doesn't matter how ugly it is. But once you get to the core things, you then work out a strategy for the non-core things. How am I going to deal with those? Because often, you've always got a boss or a boss's boss, right? Yeah. You can't just say, oh, I'm not doing that.
Yes.
You think through your strategy about how you're going to address it, right? And then, sell the fact that these are the core focuses. This is where we need to do this. And that's why the business plan is really important.
Right.
Right? Because otherwise everybody's going to have competing priorities. And that's where misalignment comes in the organisation, and where silos get formed, right? And fiefdoms get formed, because we're not all fighting the same battle here. Mm-hmm. Because we don't have something that binds us. So bring it back to that start of, you need a compelling, purpose and vision and mission in play before you kick off.
Brilliant. Now, every startup has a similar challenge in that there's always a million things to do. There's always a bunch of short-term tasks that are kind of urgent. Things like maybe it's a proposal that needs to get written and sent to a customer. Maybe you have to present to investors. But they often feel like they come at the risk of not getting done some really important longer-term goals. It might be releasing a product or entering a new market. What tips do you have around balancing these urgent short-term tasks with the medium and long-term business goals? And I have a sense that it's going to tie back to some of the stuff you've mentioned already, but
sure.
How do you balance those two things?
Yeah, well, if I just dispense with the link, right? The business plans that I write are not tablets. They're not cast in stone.
Right.
So business plan, and if you went back and heard me 10 or 15, 20 years ago, I was a proponent of, I write the business plan, I execute the business plan.
Right.
And I now understand that that's folly, right? Because business never stands still. It's a metamorphic process that is constantly on the move. And so your business plan needs to be changing as and when the market moves. And that depends on the sort of market you're in, right? So let me just say that first, right? But I think, I'm sorry, Paul, I've lost my train of thought there. Can you repose the question?
Absolutely. We were just talking about balancing those urgent short-term tasks with the sort of medium and longer-term business goals.
Yes, yeah. And so I guess I think about, I have this vision in my mind of altitude. There's this thing called altitude and direction. Mm-hmm. And it's about a balance. And the analogy is about an aircraft, right? So an aeroplane won't fly with altitude alone. Okay, if you're a helicopter, you will, but not a fixed wing aircraft, right? Very difficult.
Yeah.
And so it needs direction in order to move. Now, if you are all direction and no altitude, what happens? Mm-hmm. You're going to crash into stuff, right? Because the land isn't exactly flat. There's hills and things in the way, okay? If you're all altitude and no direction, your plane going like this can't do that forever. It's going to stall, right? And eventually crash. So the only debate we ever have strategically is, what's the inclination of this? Do we need more altitude because of cash? Mm-hmm. Do we need more direction? We've got loads of cash. We actually need to make more strategic gains, mm-hmm. right? So at a high level, that's my starting point.
Okay.
Where should I be on this dial, right? And I know it's not vertical and I know it's not horizontal, okay? And so with that in mind, I then start thinking about, what's this long-term, short-term, balance that I need to take. If there are short-term things that aren't going to tax me or my team for a long period of time, but it makes tactical progress towards the goal we're shooting towards, I think, give it some time. Mm-hmm. Okay, but I can't really describe it any other way than balance, and I bring it back to that altitude and direction. It all depends.
Yep.
But I do think about it in those two senses, and then I guess I look at the things that are in front of me and make a judgment call on, and I'm probably more inclined to lean towards the strategic directional activity because I want to build for tomorrow while I maintain today. If that sort of gives you some insight, right? Yeah. As opposed to some people might be the other way. I just want to make sure I maximize my results today, and I'll try and move the business forward a little bit. I'm not in that camp. I'd be more biased towards the other way.
That makes sense. And so in small businesses in particular, well, no, actually, in all businesses, there's often multiple kind of large projects that are on the go. So just to delve in a little bit, if we look at the project level,
yes.
In small businesses in particular, though, these projects typically have little structure and less formality. So if we take it back to the basics for an untrained project manager, what are the key elements in your mind to a successfully run project?
Yeah. It's no different than a successfully run business. It's exactly the same. In my view, it's exactly the same.
Great answer.
So you actually want to understand what's the purpose of the project, what are we trying to achieve, who's on the project team, so what's the talent pool like, what's their attitude like. It's just a mini business, right, operating. And the only difference with a project, it has a defined start and end date, right?
Yes.
And so there's something specific you want to achieve out of it.
Do you think that do you think small businesses need to have good documentation? Do you think documentation is an essential part of a good project? And also, do you think obviously communication plays an aspect there as well?
Yes. And so I agree with the documentation, provided it fits on a page.
Right.
So I'm notorious for one page. Right?
Fantastic.
You can't fit it on a page. Like it's the TLDR, right? Like just if you can't articulate it in a page, then you don't actually really understand it either, because you're using verbose language to weave your way through a subject that you can't actually pinpoint yet, right?
And do you think a formal project management methodology is required?
I think a knowledge of it is required, but I don't think it's essential. I come from a school of hard knocks, right? So I don't have any tertiary education, but I'm very big on self-education. And so I look more for the results and the methodology or the approach somebody wants to take. I don't actually care if it's Prince 2 or PMBOK or any other method or any other methodology that you want to name. But run me through, so if you're an inexperienced project manager, you have a hankering for doing this, I would ask you, how would you go about doing this?
Okay, so as before, it's like it doesn't matter what the methodology is necessarily, just make sure you've got a plan and you're disciplined about sticking to it.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, obviously, being a company that's in the productivity space, we're pretty passionate about helping other people improve their productivity. And I don't think there's a company on earth that doesn't desire to be more productive with their resources and their time. Yep. So, I mean, this might be a big question, but let me try it out anyway. What's the number one thing you think companies can do to lift their productivity?
Yeah. You're not going to be surprised by this answer, Paul.
Okay.
You need to create a compelling purpose and mission for your people to go chase.
Right.
So think about productivity, right? It starts the moment the alarm goes off in the morning, right? Where's your head at? Are you okay, a lot of people don't bounce out of bed, right? But are you happy to get up, get showered, have your brekkie, get on to work because there's something important that you're working on?
Yeah.
Right? There's productivity instantly, right? Right. So you've got to have the people in the right headspace to start with, right? That's massive. And then the second thing you want to have is a good set of tools that enables those people to be the best they can be, right?
Right.
And that's where I think, there are tools out there that really enable that.
And so
I'll just pause there for a minute because that's a great spot for me to talk about ScribblePost, right? But I don't know that you want to do that.
We'll leave that for another conversation.
You can edit that out, right? But if I use the word tool, you can interact that, right?
Absolutely, no problem. And so, but in your mind, it comes back to, as you said up front, like make sure you've got the right culture in place, make sure you've got the right people in place, because if you have those things, then by virtue of who they are and what you're trying to achieve, you're going to have a good, productive business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's the foundation. And then the second thing is the how you enable them to work.
Right. And that's where the tools come in.
The tools come in, and this sort of safety, this innovation environment that you allow that says people can go against the norms, right? They don't have to follow a particular methodology for it to be accepted.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And that comes down to the risk profile of the leadership team, right? I mean, how prepared are you to allow a person to vary from the PMBOK project methodology?
Yeah.
Now, if you live in an environment where it's dangerous, you will follow whichever methodology, because you can't get fired for following the methodology. I mean, Jesus Christ, it's Prince 2, right? They build aircraft on that, right? Yeah. Wasn't my fault. So that's a negative culture right there, right? But if you create the environment that says, I don't really care which methodology you use the one that works best for you, that'll get the outcome we want. Right?
So again, align it back to the business plan and what the business is really trying to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. And, make sure it's okay that people know that, if you make a mistake or you make a mess, we're okay with it, clean it up, right? Learn from your mistakes, clean up your mess, live up to your commitments, and we're all good. And if you can't live up to the commitment, then call it out early, right? Because we can all, we all understand things happen. We're a team. It's not about if you drop the ball once, it's all over Red Rover. It's about, how do we help you over that and get on?
Rod, I've got one last question for you.
Sure.
Putting aside global goodwill, things like world peace and philanthropy, what would be the most exciting news headline you could hope to read in the next 10 years and why?
Oh, Paul, great question. Yeah. I'll tell you the thing that's got me excited the other day. I was, and I'm sure everybody's on to this at the moment, but the work that Elon Musk is doing is, I find, terribly exciting.
Yes.
And not because it's Elon Musk. I mean, he's obviously a clever guy, right? But this idea that we can still consume energy to advance as a civilization without damaging the environment. And I'm not a greenie, by the way, right? But I just think that's awesome. And I hope that, Elon has lots of competitors, that people go, he's onto something. Because the idea of harnessing energy free from the sun to do the things that we want to do as a society is just terrific. I mean, I would love to see in 10 years from now that, there is no coal station or coal seam gas mining or any of that stuff that damages our environment unnecessarily. You think how different our world would be if there was not a single petrol motor car running around the globe at all. Right? That to me would be unbelievable.
No doubt he's doing some amazing things, and it's a pretty exciting time for some of that stuff. Rod, you've been absolutely brilliant. Your answers have been fantastic. There's some huge insights in there. So I just want to say thank you again very much for sharing your time with us.
That's my pleasure, Paul. It's been great.